let me show you how I made this miniature moose head. For this project, you'll need some thin packing paper, and I just got mine out of an Amazon package that we received. Some scrap cardstock, some masking tape, a little bit of foil, and not the heavy duty, just regular foil, some air dry clay, some Elmer's glue all, and hot glue. I will be using a pattern that I created, and I've glued 4 layers of each piece together. So there's like a little dip right there in the back, and I'm just lining it up right there in the center. This is mainly just to be an armature to glue the foil onto into the shape that we need. I also think I might want to make like a little brace right here. I'm not going to make a pattern for it, I'm just going to cut it out. And I'm not using cardstock for this. I'm using some of this small corrugated cardboard. But I think I should make a little brace right in there just for some strength. I think I should trim that off. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start just packing the foil into these little corners. And I just put a little bit of hot glue down just to hold the foil in place. You probably don't need to pack the foil real tightly either. I had some friends, they had a moose's head mounted up on their wall, and that thing was enormous. And I remember they always said that be careful around it because occasionally it would fall down. I can't imagine that thing falling on me. Here's what I've got so far. I've just filled it in almost up to that weird thing that hangs down, and I cannot remember. I just read what it was. I think it's called a dewlap. Now I'm going to try to start working on filling in maybe the head section. I know this dewlap thing, if that's the correct name for it, I know that it's not very thick, so I don't need to put much foil on it. I'm looking at my pictures to make sure that I'm not making it too thick or too thin, but it's hard to tell because all of them are so different in size. As long as it resembles a moose, that's all I care about. I don't know if you've watched the first video of my Old West hotel. The second floor above the lobby will look down into the lobby, and that's where I picture to have this moose head hanging. Up in this snout area, I'm noticing it's easier for me to follow the outline if I'm just putting little pieces in there instead of the big ones. I'm not worrying about the thickness so much right now. I'm just getting the foil on there. And now I have both sides of the snout covered, and now I'm going to start trying to thicken it up in certain spots. I decided where the eyes are going to be, and they're not actually inset like that, but I put a little bit of glue on there, and I have a little bit of foil, like a foil tube, just to kind of give it the brow. And that way it kind of helps me know where I'm at when I'm following these pictures where the eye is. I like to use the end of a paintbrush to help press and smooth. Of course, I'm thinking I'm not going to be able to put all of the detail in with this foil, so what I'll probably end up using is some paper clay if needed at the end. This little spot right here and this spot right here. It's too shiny, you can't see. But that's where I picture the eyes to be. So I was just trying to give it a little bit of definition there. I'm pretty happy with this side of the snout, and I know it's probably hard for you to see with it being so shiny. I haven't filled in the dewlap yet though. Now I need to work on this side, but it's almost there. And looking at pictures of moose while you are working on it is very helpful, because I kind of got lost once I did the head up here when I came in here, and it really helped because there's like some muscles and the snout and things, and it really helps you know the placement. So the next step, now that it's all covered in the foil, I'm going to take masking tape and I'm going to cover it completely in masking tape. And then that will help me see too where I might need to add some more detail. I like to just work with little small pieces of masking tape. I don't try to put big long strips on at once. And to me, I feel like this masking tape helps to fill in a lot of the the cracks and crevices. It also helps the papier-mâché that we're going to do in the next part. It sticks a lot better to that than just to the foil. Now we're going to start the papier-mâché process. And to do that, you'll need to make up some kind of water and glue solution that you may like to use for papier-mâché. I like to use Ultimate Papier-Mâché's cooked flour recipe, and it's a cup of water and 2 tablespoons of flour. This is some packing paper that I got in something from Amazon. I like it because it's pretty thin, so I'm just going to cut it up into some skinny strips. Actually, I'm going to tear it into some skinny strips, and that way you won't see the edge of the paper when it's all dry. Okay, now that we have some paper, get the paper wet, and then I'll just lay it right onto the moose head. And there's no right or wrong place to start, and I need to make sure that I keep it smooth because I don't want any wrinkles, and that way when I go to paint it later on, the wrinkles won't show up. And it sticks really well to that tape. Once you start the papier-mâché, you can really start to see the details and what you might need to add and what you might need to fix. Some of the little tight areas you might have to use something like I sometimes use my tweezers to kind of push it in there gently. If you haven't papier-mâchéed before, try to have all of your strips already torn for yourself, or at least have a wet towel handy because your fingers will get really sticky. You'll get used to the size that you like to work with of the strips of paper. You'll see quickly if you've made them too big because you'll have a lot of wrinkles, or if you've made them too small like I did this one, it works, but you have to put a lot more on and it takes more time. So you just have to get comfortable with all of that and figure out what's going to work for you. Here it is completely covered with the paper. The eyes were a little tricky, and what helped me is I cut small pieces and then I used a dowel, the pointy part of the dowel, to kind of work it in there to flatten it out. But they're not going to stay hollow like that. I am going to put some paper clay in to be the eyes, and once it's all dry, which I'm going to let it dry overnight, I'm hoping to use paper clay on the nose to add some definition for the snout. Of course, I could just leave it like this. It will look enough like a moose that I'll be happy. I'm using a little bit of air dry clay to add more definition to the nostril area, and I'm also using a silicone brush and my fingers, and I'm making sure to keep them damp. It helps me to keep the clay soft. I made a couple of eyeballs and flattened some clay to create an upper and lower eyelid. I'm just working carefully and slowly, and I'm trying my best not to touch the eyeball. I don't want to put any dents into it. I really love the way the eyes are turning out. They look very realistic to me. I couldn't have done this without the reference pictures. They've helped a lot. And now to work on the dewlap. I put some paper clay on it and made the edges kind of rough, and I'm running my tweezers through there to give it some texture. I'm gluing 5 layers for each of the antlers. Before the glue dried, I slowly curved them into shape. This is a weak spot right here, so I had to be extra careful not to bend it. Here is how the curve is looking. Once I was happy with it, I sanded the edges a little bit. I noticed the antlers have a lot of texture near the base. I'm using some clay again to thicken the base and to add a little bit of texture running my tweezers through it. Here's a closer look at the base of the antlers. Before painting the antlers to help smooth everything out, I'm painting a layer of wood glue over them. I'm base coating the antlers an off-white color. I believe it was parchment from Apple Barrel. And then I'm going to dry brush some moccasin over that, just really lightly, and then I put some darker chalk pastels on the edges. I'm painting his eyes first with some black. I base coat the entire head with I don't know what you'd call this color, kind of a tan. And now I'm using a light brown, and all I did was take a little bit of the tan and I darkened it some. And I kept doing that so I would get different shades of brown, but using that first color and just darkening it. I'm using some grocery bag to create the ears. I thicken the paper by painting it with some glue first, and then I fold it over. I drew out a pointy teardrop shape for the ears. and then cut it out. I pinch the ear at the base, and then I just hold it with my tweezers and paint it that way. I almost forgot I need to use this diamond glaze and paint his eyes to give them a nice glossy appearance. From my reference pictures, it looks like the antlers are coming out right from behind his eye area. I'm gluing the antlers in first. I start by getting a hole started with my tweezers, and then I'm using a little bamboo skewer to push the foil out of the way to make room for the antler. If you happen to give this a try, I would suggest cutting the little slice for the ear too at the same time. I didn't do it, and I wish I did. I tried to pack as much glue as I could in there before I pushed the antler into it. If any oozes out, you can always wipe it away. And see, this is what I'm talking about. The antlers were in the way, and I wish I would have cut those little slices for the ear before that. Maybe even put the ear on before the antlers, because there just wasn't a lot of room for my fingers. I glued his ears facing out, but they could be glued on in any position. And here he is complete. I'm so happy with him, especially this side. That's his best side right there. The other side, his eye is a little bit squeezed closed, but I really like him. And here's how he looks compared to my deer that I did before in another video. And I have included the pattern in the description to help you if you would like to give it a try. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.